Spring 1941. Europe, drenched in the blood and smoke of 20 months of war, seems to catch its breath. And in this window of invasion and upheaval near the Balkans, new unexpected events emerge. In the south of the continent lies a chessboard of ports, mountain passes, and narrow coastlines. Here the interests of Berlin and Rome, as well as the hopes and fears of London, intersect. Italian aggression against Greece in the fall of 1940 reached a stalemate. British support on the island and in North Africa complicated the Axis's calculations. In Belgrade, a coup d'etat, which Hitler took as a personal insult. These events were not random, but a chain of decisions, calculations, and human emotions that led to the Lightning Campaign of April 1941. Why was this important to Hitler? To understand the why, we must discard the myths and look at the naked strategy. For Berlin, the Balkans were important for several reasons simultaneously. To protect the southern flank before a major operation to the east, control over Greece and Yugoslavia was to eliminate threats to the rear in the event of a future attack on the USSR, to maintain cooperation with Italy and protect its honor. Mussolini, who invaded Greece in October 1940 and suffered defeat, raised questions about Axis prestige. Hitler considered it necessary to ensure his ally, although not all sources indicate this was a purely military necessity, to protect vital resources and communications. Control over the coast and ports would have prevented British interference in the transportation of Romanian oil and complicated the operations of the British fleet in the eastern Mediterranean. After the coup d'etat in Yugoslavia, March 27, 1941, Hitler took it as a personal humiliation. In Directive Number 25, he explicitly ordered that Yugoslavia be treated as a hostile state and destroyed as a political entity without mercy. Words that reflected a mixture of pragmatism and angry politics. It was precisely this combination of motives, politics, resources, and prestige that pushed Berlin to invade two countries simultaneously. This wasn't simply helping the Italians. For the German High Command, it meant closing a potential source of threat, consolidating influence in the south, and establishing a solid rear base for future operations. The story began in the fall of 1940. Italy, considered a junior Axis partner, invaded Greece on October 28, 1940. But it quickly became clear that the easy campaign was turning into a stubborn and costly confrontation. The Greek army not only repelled the main attacks, but also launched a counteroffensive, pushing the Italians back into Albania. This defeat so irritated Rome and simultaneously alarmed Berlin that it became one of the reasons for Germany's future intervention. Britain, seeing an opportunity to open a front against the Axis powers, began supporting Greece with material and air support. As a result, the situation escalated. At the end of March 1941, a coup occurred in Belgrade. Young officers overthrew the government, which had just signed the Tripartite Pact. For Hitler, this was a personal challenge and a pretext for immediate revenge in military action. That same week, March 27, he signed a directive ordering preparations for an intervention. Plan and forces of the parties. Germany. The campaign against Yugoslavia and Greece involved large Wehrmacht units, motorized and tank corps, as well as Luftwaffe aircraft, which provided massive bombing strikes and cover for airborne, mechanized columns. According to reports, Germany had approximately 300,000 to 340,000 men and nearly 1,000 aircraft in the overall operation against Yugoslavia. The results of the operations reveal a huge concentration of armored and motorized forces. Italy. Although the Italian campaign in Greece began in the fall of 1940, by April 1941, Italian armies were already operating in Albania and on the Greek border. In the final stages of the campaign, they collaborated with the Germans in the south and along the Adriatic coast. Italian forces, hundreds of thousands of soldiers and air power, were simultaneously involved in offensives and occupations. Germany's allies, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, provided core and territories for troop movements. Bulgaria occupied eastern Thrace. Hungary and Romania participated in separate sectors and received occupation zones after their capitulations. Yugoslavia, formally possessed significant manpower reserves, up to 700,000 on paper. But the army was poorly mobilized, poorly trained, and politically divided. Its weapons, command, and combat effectiveness were inadequate. Yugoslavia's aviation and armor were inferior in quantity and quality. Greece staunchly fought against the Italian invasion and then against the Germans. Already in the winter of 1940 to 41, the Greek army had proven its ability to launch counterattacks. But in April 1941, it found itself disunited and forced to repel attacks from two directions, from Albania and Bulgaria. Britain deployed a limited expeditionary force to Greece, but these forces were clearly insufficient to hold the line under full German pressure. On the morning of April 6, 1941, German bombers and fighters launched a massive attack on airfields and communication hubs in Yugoslavia and Greece. The Luftwaffe's attack was particularly brutal in Belgrade, and within the first few hours, the city was seriously damaged. The Germans dubbed the attack on the capital Operation Retribution and deliberately targeted infrastructure and communication lines with devastating effect. A mixture of tactical air power and political intent. The brutality of the first phase and the rapid advance of the tank groups soon led to the rapid disintegration of the Yugoslav army. By April 17th to 18th, most command centers had ceased resistance, and the regime in Belgrade had effectively collapsed. On the Greek front, the Germans launched an offensive from Bulgarian territory, clearing a path to the rear of the Greek forces, with whom the Italians were already engaged on the Albanian front. Strategically, this was a double blow. While the Yugoslav theater diverted attention and forces, German columns sought to break through the defenses on the Greek Metaxas Line and, bypassing the main fortifications, strike from the rear. By the end of April, the Germans were already entering Athens. On April 27th, German troops entered the capital, and by April 30th, the southern part of the mainland had been effectively occupied. The operation ended with the surrender of a significant portion of the Greek forces. German tactics combined air power, tank spearheads of motorized corps, and rapid maneuvers. Panzer Corps penetrated deep penetrations, cutting off communications and creating pockets where Yugoslav units lost contact and supplies. Faced with this, the poorly mobilized command quickly lost control, and divisions disintegrated and surrendered. The Italian offensive from the west in certain sectors only accelerated the collapse. The entire operation, from its inception to its capitulation, took just a few days. The spring of 1941 demonstrated Germany's ability to reduce a country to a short and brutal campaign. Greece is a land of mountains and narrow valleys. Here, success required not only the strength of armor, but also the ability to conduct combat operations in difficult terrain. The Germans, attacking from Bulgaria, successfully bypassed the Metaxas Line, similar to the Maginot Line, and used mechanized forces for flanking maneuvers. The battle for the Isthmus of Corinth and holding positions for the evacuation of Allied forces became crucial. While weather conditions, mountainous routes, and the Greeks' familiarity with the terrain gave the defenders some advantages, they were insufficient to offset the Axis' numerical and technical superiority. The Germans and Italians used both naval and air power in the operation, amphibious operations on individual islands, strengthening control of the straits, and attempts to isolate the coasts. The battles for port hubs, the evacuation of British troops, and the Allies' attempts to hold their positions until they could resupply, all this lent the campaign moments of heroism and tragedy. By mid-April, much of the war had already taken its toll. Italy, though previously broken by the Greek counteroffensive, eventually adapted to German successes. Southern Greece was already in danger of being overrun. In London, the decision to send an expeditionary force to Greece was controversial. Churchill saw it as an opportunity to get even with Mussolini and open a new front that, if successful, would divert Axis resources from North Africa and Romania. But the transfer of forces from Egypt and limited resources meant that assistance was limited. By the time the German offensive began, the British Expeditionary Force was fighting in mountainous conditions, where resistance was fierce but strategically vulnerable. The result was evacuation and capitulation in the rear. Thousands of Anglo-Allied soldiers were captured, and most of the Greek army was encircled. Yugoslavia, meanwhile, had no time to fully mobilize. Political instability, A coup and divisions within the command made defense impossible. By April 17th to 18th, many commanders were already seeking terms for an armistice, and on April 18th, Yugoslavia was effectively divided between the occupiers and the new puppet regimes. Immediately after the capitulations, Germany, Italy, Hungary, and Bulgaria divided the territory of Yugoslavia and Greece among themselves. Puppet regimes emerged, and the population, including large Serbian, Jewish, and Roma communities, found itself under the rule of repressive regimes and repression. In Greece, the occupation began with widespread devastation and a food crisis. In Yugoslavia, a bloody, protracted guerrilla war, which ultimately changed the balance of power in the region. At the strategic level, the consequences were twofold. On the one hand, Germany achieved immediate success. Its southern flank was sealed, Axis influence was strengthened, and Romanian oil received additional protection. On the other hand, the operation consumed time and effort. Intervention in the Balkans, some historians believe, could have delayed the start of Operation Barbarossa and affected the timing of the campaign against the USSR. Finally, the heaviest price was that the occupation spawned large-scale resistance movements. Communist and nationalist partisans in Yugoslavia, as well as Greek resistance fighters, forced Germany and its satellites to maintain significant forces in the region for years to come. Forces that could have been useful elsewhere in the war. The spring of 1941 demonstrated how quickly the map can be changed by combining surprise, air power, and tanks with political strikes. The German campaign in Yugoslavia and Greece is an example of classic lightning war, Blitzkrieg, on the one hand, and a poorly coordinated and politically vulnerable defense on the other. Despite its rapid success in division of territory, the operation brought new long-term problems to Berlin. The need to hold vast occupation zones, a growing partisan threat, and possibly a strategic delay that changed the timing of further operations in the East.